Welcome back to Pedaling Squares Through a Mammal's Life. I'm it today. You'll notice there won't be a guest. This isn't part of the intro. This is it. So, why is it just me? I'm going to talk to you about an eventful, basically end of June into July period in my life. And I'm sharing that with you, number one, as an explanation for why there wasn't a July podcast. And number two, I guess it's a public service announcement of some sort. In that time period, from late June through basically July, I almost died. Is that late June through July were very eventful. Was a very eventful time period for me. This blog post or this posting is going to be about me almost dying on June 22. But let me set the stage for you. June 18, finish the Garrett County Double Diablo, which is a heck of a ride with my good friend Nate. Come home and go out for a training ride to basically recuperate from that event. And on June 22, I almost died, and that's what we're going to talk about. And then after that, I experienced a back injury requiring a course of steroids that kept me on my back for 3 weeks. And as soon as I started feeling better from that course of steroids, I immediately get COVID. So I'm working myself back into some fitness. The heart rate is where it needs to be on all my workouts, but the power numbers are dragging. And the reason I'm getting into that is there's basically two mental health issues that I'm going to be talking about today. The first is my experience on June 22. The second, I'm not going to talk about, but I'm going to direct you to the blog at KentuckyBikeLawyer.com that accompanies this posting about some mental health issues I experienced as a result of taking the course of steroids. It's a little involved. There's some research behind it. It doesn't lend itself to a talking head, and that's why I'm setting the stage that there are two separate and distinct mental health issues that are the one's in electronic paper, so to speak, in the blog, and the other is what I'm going to talk about, which is a result of the July 22 crash. So, with that as an introduction, what happened on, I said July, I meant June. What happened on June 22? Well, I come home, go out for a recovery ride. I typically ride at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 to 2. It's one of the benefits of self-employment. And typically ride old country roads. And traffic was unfortunately being detoured onto what's referred to locally as Mount Carmel Hill, and I was apparently backing up traffic. So the way this hill's set up is it's an S turn, and the first S in the turn is a hard right-hander, and the grade, going from memory, is something like 13%. So you're throwing down 350, 400 watts just to hold 7, 8, 9 miles an hour. So this is a tough bend to get around, and my typical practice is to take the lane. And for whatever reason, I was taking the lane, but for whatever reason it wasn't that kind of 2/3 that I typically take when there's a up-a-line curve. I was only taking up about 1/3 of the road. A fellow behind me in a Jeep, and you get some sense this is the other side of the curve, so the approach is in the background. As I'm approaching this, I'm taking about 1/3 of the lane. That's not good enough for the guy in the Jeep, so he comes around me, cuts back in front of me, freaks out the guy at the top of the hill who's driving a very large HVAC Ford Econoline van. I don't know if they come in 3/4 ton variety or just half ton, but it's a big vehicle, big chrome bumper. And I'll come back to that bumper in a second. And he freaks out. The guy in the Jeep at the top of the guy in the van at the top of the hill freaks out as the Jeep comes back into the lane that I'm occupying. And he locks up his brakes and comes across the double yellow line, and I estimate, based on his trajectory, that he's coming right at me. And I can't accelerate out of this situation, so what do? Make a decision to make myself as small as possible, and I, like you see at the end of a bike race, I do a bike throw and throw the bike and me into the hillside. And I don't know if this does it any justice, but that hillside kind of starts here and goes up. There's really nowhere to go. There's a high curb cut right here. I'm guessing that's to control surface water, and that's about 6 to 8 inches. Okay, so to set the stage, I can't do a bunny hop. I've just got to lay myself down the best I can, and my decision is bike throw, make yourself small, pull my left leg up to 12 o'clock and just kind of ball up and weather the storm, so to speak. Well, my trigonometry was right. He was coming right at me, and he ended up, and this right here, these 2 black lines are not part of the road. This is superimposed with the aid of my 17-year-old daughter. That is the outside tire of the Ford Econoline van. That is outside, meaning driver's side. That's the passenger side skid mark right there. So he basically runs over my front fork, cracks my zip 302s, and goes right underneath my bottom bracket, and then he hits this curb cut, and then you can see from the orientation of these skid marks, he goes into an almost roll, okay? And he came within about 18 inches of my head, laying on the ground with that chrome bumper, and the front tire bounced off this curb cut right underneath the bottom bracket. So if my left foot was down at 6 o'clock, I wouldn't have a left foot today. That's how close it was. And that was pretty scary. And I'm sharing it with you because there's some life lessons in this. Not life lessons that you tell your kids, but life lessons for cyclists that can be gleaned from my experience. There's basically 3. The first is about 3-foot laws in most states. The second is about taking the lane as a cyclist. And the third is this mental health issue that I want to talk about. So let me address those in reverse order. That was a scary experience. Period. End of story. I've been in ERs, ER rooms before as a result of bike crashes. I've had bike crashes in the past. This was the scariest, hands down. And to state the obvious, as a cyclist, you never win. There's just not enough mass. There isn't any protection that's afforded you by a 16-pound bicycle and a 1/4 inch of Lycra, if that. So the kind of visceral reality sets in at the accident scene, but it's more like a seed that germinates for 3 or 4 days afterwards. It was a thought of that chrome bumper coming 18 inches from my left eye, or left side of my face. I couldn't get that thought out of my head. It was just something I was ruminating on and couldn't shake. And for 3 or 4 days, I did not sleep well. I had intrusive dreams or intrusive thoughts about that bumper coming across the corner of my field of vision. And I woke up every morning with that thought. And that lasted, like I said, 4 days. And what I did to address it, right, wrong, or indifferent, is to go right back out to that climb and just do it over and over again. I took one of my good friends, Trevor, out there on the second day and verbalized what had happened, walked him through the skid marks, and that helped a lot in processing it. I'm back on my bike. I don't have the intrusive thoughts now. The whole episode of post-traumatic stress lasted approximately 1 week, but it can be a lot longer than that for other cyclists involved in equally serious or more serious accidents. So it's a very real byproduct of these crashes. And how you go about dealing with that's something you gotta obviously deal with on a case-by-case basis. There's definitely room for therapy in a person's life after an event like that. If the thoughts are intrusive and they don't go away, what's that tell you? You got to deal with it. I dealt with it by going back out there and riding and re-riding the hill. I think the real test is when I get back on my Indy Fab, my white Indy Fab that I've had for over 17 years. The bike's gone through at least 3 sets of wheels and at least 3 sets of Gruppos. The bike is very near and dear to my heart. I don't know how I'm going to feel when I ride that bike. I don't know what kind of response I'm going to have emotionally when I get back on it. But it was a very real experience following the accident. So that's the mental health side of it. What are the other 2 lessons? The other lesson is 3-foot law. And combined in that is the fact that you're traffic. If you are a cyclist, you've got a right to be on the roadway, you're part of traffic, and everyone, quite frankly, has to respect that, especially in a detour situation like I found myself in. And there are 2 ways to handle that, especially with blind curves. One, you can hope everybody maintains a distance behind you as you struggle up a 13% grade, or you can take the initiative, which is my usual practice, and take 2/3 of the lane, making it impossible for those motorists to come around you on a blind curve unless they're absolutely crazy. And I sort of did that. I took 1/3 of the lane. I'm going from memory. I was not as assertive as I should have been, and that doesn't excuse the behavior of the motorist behind me. But you know, those are the lessons. 3-foot law is real. You got to obey it, and the taking of the lane is an assertiveness, an assertive move that unfortunately we need to take, and I'm living proof of that. When you look at the orientation of my bike, and this is exactly where it got run over. This is the position it was in when the front tire came over this front wheel. If I was upright and on the inside of that white fog line, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So taking the lane is irritating to some motorists, but it might save your life. I took the lane, but I didn't take enough of it, and I got a jerk in a Jeep that didn't even stop to see what happened. The fella in the van was a stand-up guy. He was a fella that was putting his life together after a period of incarceration, and instead of driving off or making light of the situation, he immediately came over and checked on me. It was a move, it was a demonstration of a man with good character, and that's a far cry from the kind of treatment I got from the guy in the gray Jeep behind me. I'm not going to say I was thankful for it, because I wasn't thankful for the event occurring, but I'm appreciative of the fact the guy was a stand-up dude. In fact, he had to drive me home because my wheel wouldn't work. I wasn't in any position to ride. I was completely frazzled and immediately went to the orthopedic urgent care to get my shoulder and back checked out. And fortunately, the worst aspect of the ride was needing a new set of wheels and a new fork and a tune-up. That's the beauty of having tie. Bike didn't crack or get scratched up, but could have been much worse. So let's end with the life lessons here. Post-traumatic stress is very real after a bike crash or a bike accident. 2, 3-foot law is there for a reason. And 3, take the lane, especially on blind curves. Just might save your life.